bottle of wine, gonna hold you tonight, oh yeah. Well, we know I'm going away. How I wish it weren't so. So take this wine and drink with me. Let's delay misery. Save tonight. If I break a dawn, come tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll be gone. Save tonight. If I break a dawn.
Oh well, that was a really long and totally unnecessary intro. Hi there, Coach Sage here with another training talk. Today we're going to talk about taking a break, time off from running, whether it's part of a planned break, how fast do you lose fitness? I get this question a lot with you high school runners doing cross country between track season, college runners, but also if you're just planning a different off season, maybe in the winter, holiday season, you need a break, you want to ask, or you get a niggle or an injury, and you want to know how much time you could take off, not lose too much fitness, but also in the context of periodization of your training year, your training season, and that could be plural as well. It could be a multi-year process, a lifetime of running, right? You got to take some breaks to freshen up, recharge the system, reset aerobic base, things like that. We'll get into some details and factors on this. Again, I've talked about this in some other talks, how to recover from a run. You can check out our playlist, as well as subscribe on here for more videos like that, and a link to that recovery after run video, because there's a lot of factors, but let's get started. All right, so first you're going to do a little fun movie clip. This is totally random too and totally unnecessary. Let's hit the clip there, recovery meal after a run.
Well, I reckon I'll have some of them French fried potatoes.
All right, so I apologize for my poor acting skills. Maybe you know what movie that's from. I'll give you another hint at the very end of this video. But to get into the training talk, I had to take a break, kind of an unplanned break after the Otter Trail race, the Golden Trail Series final, because I tweaked my knee a bit, didn't want to risk it, took 2 weeks totally off. For me, that is a really long break, right? In my 21 years of basically year-round distance running and training and racing, I've only had to take extended breaks. I've never had an overuse injury that's taken me out for more than 2 or 3 weeks at a time. I've had some mild shin splints, things like that. You could have gotten a much more serious injury, though. You could get some Achilles tendonitis. You could get plantar fasciitis. You could get all sorts of inflammation injuries. You could get sudden blunt force injuries. I've also had a lot of those, stitches from races, as well as overtrained and need to reset the system and burn hot. But I'll take planned intentional breaks between seasons in school, doing cross country in the fall, take a week off, maybe 2 weeks off. For me, that's a pretty long planned break, and I'm not doing anything for like a week. And how much fitness you lose in the time off from training is all relative to your training age, your relative history, what level you've reached in the sport, how many miles per week or kilometers per week you've been running, what your event focus is, what your nutrition is, all these health factors, your sleep, life stress level, work or family obligations, school obligations, things like that. So it's a balance of many variables, and I'll kind of get into some more general principles on this. But for me personally, those are the planned breaks. I also took several months off once I got mono when I was 20 years old or so in college, and I had to take more than a month off. So that was probably the longest break I ever took from running. But, I'm uncoordinated. I don't ski in the winter. I'm too uncoordinated to ski. I might get into some cross training more. I dabble in road cycling a little bit as cross training, but you might have a winter sport like skiing or something that you could do in the winter season. A lot of professional athletes do that, ski mountaineering and cross country, things like that. To have fitness, but not to be always pounding your body with high impact force running or always training. And the general principle I want to give to you guys is the idea that you can't be burning it hot all year round, year after year, right? You can't be on fire at 100% racing at a super high level all year long and keep carrying that over and over, because eventually you're going to crash and burn. You're going to get injured. You're going to overtrain. Your race performances are going to start slipping down. And you see this, I've seen this with my own career, but other top sponsored runners, we got, there's pressure to race all around, all calendar season, right? You could go to the southern hemisphere in the winter and the northern hemisphere and do mountain races still. And so there's this pressure to always be doing events, always be training for a big ultra. And when you're lining up, 6, 8, 10 races a year, more than that. I did more than that this year, not ultras, but I've done more than 8 or 10 ultras in a year. it starts getting to be too much because you can't focus your training, but also the recovery and the stress. And, part of it is a mental component, right? You get just exhausted from always being training hard, always doing hard, high intensity workouts and not resetting the system, establishing aerobic base at easy intensity running and getting in a consistent training block. But you're risking burnout, right? You're risking this overuse, overtraining, over injury. So it's good to take planned breaks, and how much you want to take off depends on your competitive goals. But for me, I'll take 5 days off, totally off from physical activity after most races, ultra races, marathons, road marathons, things like that. For the shorter distance races, like on 5K, 10K track, even half marathon, I could recover a bit faster, and I could even run the day after the race. But I'm cautious with the recovery because there's residual fatigue building up. And so, if I take a couple days off, I'm not going to lose any fitness. Then that goes for you as well. 2 or 3 days totally off. It could be a blessing. It could be a rest. You could have a boost in your fitness because you've recovered, you've rested the legs a bit, things like that. Now you start talking about taking 5 days to 7 days off, totally off, no cross training, no physical activity. For me, I'm going to start losing fitness pretty quickly. For you, that might not necessarily be the case, right? If you haven't trained, running 6 or 100 miles a week, 160K a week all the time, and you haven't been running every day for a lot of times, your body might not be used to that. So taking 5, 6, 7 days off, you might not lose that much, right? You might lose a little bit of your edge. And the higher the level you are, let's say if you're a sub 3 hour marathon runner, you might notice it more than someone who's a 4 hour marathon runner, for example. And there's some genetic factors and lifestyle factors in there as well. But talking about taking a week off, that could be a planned long break for someone at a really advanced level. For a more beginner runner, though, that could just be a regular break during the holiday season or something like that. For me, if I take 2 weeks off, I'm basically back to square one. I feel like I've lost almost all my fitness. That's not necessarily true because I have so much base residual fitness. And again, if you've been running for years and years and years and you've run high mileage, maxed out your potential more in the half marathon and marathon, then you may notice a bigger drop from your max potential. But relative fitness level, you're still a fit athlete, right? I could still go out and run 7-minute mile pace for my runs, but I do notice my breathing's a little harder and my heart rate is a little bit higher, maybe only 10 beats per minute higher than when I get super fit. And, it'll take me a matter of several months to get back into sub 225, sub 220 marathon shape, whereas most days I could probably roll out the door and still run a decent marathon. But I've had this lifetime of base and residual fitness, and changes happen at the cellular level, right? You have mitochondria, the powerhouse of this cell. You have capillary beds, blood vessels, how lean you are, right? Building up the strength, the tendon strength, tensile strength in your tendons, I could say, and the muscular strength and that muscle memory. All these factors that have built you up as an endurance athlete over the years always come to play, but you start losing your edge, your fitness edge. And so for me, taking 2 weeks off, totally, I call it resetting the system. I get sore when I start running again. And I noticed this last week. I'd been running for about a week after my injury. I took 2 weeks off, basically did a little cycling, but not very much. And, got my runs up to 10 miles, 16K. But then I had to do most of the rim to rim was sandy, basically running like an ultra without very much training. I know how some of you guys feel now. It was very painful and I get very, very sore, a lot of muscular stress. So, you should plan breaks when you're not necessarily injured. You should have an off season, so to speak, if not to reset the system and to reestablish aerobic base. And that goes back to slowly building your volume up, your consistency up in training with mileage increases so that, you start at 0 and then you slowly got to introduce slow, easy pace running, conversational pace we call it, before you worry about any high intensity speed work and getting in shape really, really fast, because you can't rush the process. You got to always be patient, and you're at a risk for injury after you've taken a break or after a marathon or a race. You don't want to rush back into things because you could get an overuse injury really easily. So gradually listen to your body and take that break mentally, eat your favorite junk food, things like that. Indulge a little bit, especially I think around the holiday season. People tend to do that more. When it's cold and snowy outside, it kind of periodizes your year anyway because the weather's not as good. Or for me, the trails are covered in more ice and snow, so I don't go up high in the mountains as much. I can focus on speed. And I'll let you know my personal schedule heading into the next year, 2019's competitive season. I'll give you a clue. I haven't announced it finally, but it will start with some more runnable stuff, going back to the faster wheelhouse, so to speak, and some really competitive races against the most competitive ultra runners and marathon runners in the world, hopefully. So keep you guys updated with that. I am finalizing next year's schedule, but I took a break. And I'm not doing that 100-miler on the track because it's just too rushed of a time frame now. I do want to get back to that later as well, but I digress here. Anyway, the point is you plan an off season, you take an off season, you might cross train, do some light cross training so you don't totally lose everything, but have fun, mix it up, cause some muscle confusion, so to speak. I work my upper body sometimes with a couple free weight arm weights. Even doing a cycling on the bike is working the legs in a different way, but the heart and lungs don't know that, right? You could still get a pretty high heart rate, very high heart rate spikes on the bike, but also in things like skiing or, even exercises, weightlifting at the gym and things like that. So you could change it up, but the goal in mind is to get back to your core competency and your goal race, whatever that may be. And, for the longer distance events, say half marathon and longer, you might need a much longer training block of several months and periodized training. So, you take that into account and take your genetics into account as well as, you can't change that. Injury history, though, we might have more imbalances in our legs. You might have, stiffer muscles, hip flexors, back problems, things like that. So lifestyle factors, but also your nutrition, right? If you're eating healthy, you could recover faster. If you're getting enough sleep, you could recover faster. All these things kind of tie into the whole training load and how quickly you'll lose fitness, especially if you're maybe gaining a little weight in the off season. That could be okay though, because you're cycling it, right? It's all about the periodization schedule. So I've seen this with a lot of competitor runners, sponsored runners. You got pressure to race all year round and be at 100% year after year after year, and you want to be this aerobic monster. And eventually you're going to burn out or you're going to break down and get injured over and over again, and just your performance is going to start slipping. So it's better to dial things back before injury and illness makes you take a forced break, and to actually have some planned breaks between seasons after goal races to reset the system mentally and physically. And how much time you take off, again, it's okay to lose a lot of fitness, and over 2 weeks time, more than 2 weeks, you're probably going to lose a substantial amount of fitness if you've trained at a really high level. But, taking a couple of days off here and there is going to be pretty negligible. Even taking a week off, it's definitely a smart thing to do, and not very long of a time frame to take off from training, but it depends on what level you've been at. And the idea, I hope, at least for you and for me as well, is that I do running to be part of a healthy lifestyle. And I'm in this sport long term, right? I want to be running when I'm for decades and decades. I want to be really competitive and push the scene really competitively, especially in this next 5 or 10 years. But at the same time, you got to have fun with what you're doing, and fun comes from mixing it up a lot of times. And you got to stay healthy and not overstrain or overtrain. And if you're healthy, you could be consistent in your training, right? If you're unhealthy, you're going to get injured, you're going to get sick. You're not going to be able to train consistently, especially long term. And if you're in the long term game, then health comes first. With health comes consistency in training, being able to maintain a consistently high volume or a high level of aerobic training, and always coming back to reestablishing that aerobic base, starting with the lower intensity, then sprinkling in higher intensity and speed as a premium and things like that, extra neuromuscular work, extra muscle strength, and recovery from hard efforts and long runs and races and things like that. So that's my spiel on recovery from taking a break in the off season, periodizing your year or your season. It could be, you're doing a fall season, winter season, spring season, trail running season, marathon season for Boston or something like that. So kind of depends on a lot of personal factors, but I hope I touched on them and wasn't too vague in this talk. Thanks so much for subscribing on here. Really, really appreciate your support. We're going to have more podcasts. We're going to have more videos outside, adventure videos, informative videos. You guys name it. Thanks to the Patreon supporters for really making this possible, especially with the new audio gear. And we'll try to keep making improvements as well. Feel free to comment below with what's been going on with you, what you guys think. Any comments are always welcome. I read most of them, so really appreciate it. We're doing a sale the next 2 days on sagerunning.com. You get 30% off any product. It's our training plans, any surface, any distance. Be sure to check out the @SageRunning Instagram and Twitter handles, as well as we have a Facebook page. Thank you so much, guys. Hope your running's going well, and stay tuned for more Sage Running videos. Some people call it a sling blade. I call it a Kaiser blade. It's got that long curved blade, kind of shaped like a banana.